Ada Wade held the final note until the last man in the saloon stopped breathing. Her voice filled the smoky air like honey poured over broken glass, sweet and sharp, impossible to ignore. She stood on the small wooden platform at the back of the Lucky Shoe, one hand resting on the upright piano, the other pressed flat against her ribs. The dusty blue dress she wore had seen better days, but under the lantern light, it still caught enough shine to make her look like something other than what she was. A woman with a stolen surname and a past she could not afford to remember. The applause came in a wave, rough hands clapping, boots stomping, a few whistles from the poker tables near the door. Ada smiled the smile she had practiced for 2 years, the one that said thank you without saying anything else, and stepped down from the platform. Her shawl slipped from her shoulders, and she caught it, wrapping the brown wool tight around her arms. The night air pushed through the gaps in the walls, carrying the smell of dust and horse sweat and something else. Something wrong. The door slammed open, and the room went silent. Ada turned, still holding her shawl, and saw the man in the doorway. Tall, broad across the shoulders, his tan coat streaked with something dark along the sleeve. His hat sat low over his face, but she could see his jaw, the hard line of it, clean shaven and locked tight. Sandy brown hair fell in uneven waves past his collar, tangled and dusty. He stepped inside and the floor creaked under his boots. His eyes swept the room, pale and sharp, and when they landed on her, they stopped. She did not look away. She should have, but she did not. He crossed the saloon in 4 long strides, ignoring the men who pulled back from their tables, the bartender who reached under the counter for something heavy. He stopped 2 feet from her, and his voice came out low and rough, like gravel under wagon wheels. I need a place to stay. You know anyone who rents quiet? Ada tilted her head, studying him. Blood on the coat sleeve, dust on his face, exhaustion in the way he held his shoulders, like he had been riding hard for days. She should have told him no. She should have pointed him toward the boarding house on the edge of town and turned away. But there was something in his eyes, something that looked like the same thing she saw in the mirror every morning. Fear dressed up as defiance. Star Ranch, she said. 2 miles west. They take in strays sometimes. If you can work. He stared at her for a long moment, then nodded once and turned toward the door. The crowd parted for him like water around a stone. He was gone before anyone spoke, the door swinging shut behind him, and the room exploded into whispers. Ada wrapped her shawl tighter and walked toward the back stairs. She did not hear the boots behind her until a hand caught her arm, rough and urgent. She spun and found herself looking into the face of Deputy Lang, his mustache twitching, his eyes narrow and suspicious. That man, he said. You know him. No, Ada said. I do not. You sent him to Star Ranch. I told him where people go when they need work. That is all. Lang leaned closer, his breath sour with whiskey. His coat had blood on it. You see that? I see a lot of things in here, Ada said quietly. Most of them are none of my business. Lang released her arm and stepped back, but his eyes stayed on her face. You be careful, Miss Wade. Man like that brings trouble. And trouble has a way of sticking to people who help it. Ada turned and climbed the stairs without answering. Her room was small, barely large enough for the narrow bed and the trunk at its foot. But it was hers, and it locked from the inside. She closed the door and leaned against it, listening to the noise from below, the piano starting up again, someone singing off-key. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the door until they stopped. She did not sleep. She lay on the bed with her eyes open, watching the shadows move across the ceiling, listening to the town settle into its uneasy quiet. Broken Bluff was not a large town, but it was loud, full of men who worked the ranches and the mines, who drank too much and fought too often, who did not ask questions about where a woman came from or what name she used. It had been safe for 2 years. Now it felt like a trap. Morning came gray and cold, the kind of morning that promised rain before noon. Ada dressed in her second dress, a faded brown cotton with long sleeves and a high collar, and tied her hair back with a strip of ribbon. She walked down to the kitchen behind the saloon and made coffee on the stove, standing close to the heat, waiting for the sun to break through the clouds. The knock on the back door made her jump. She set the coffee pot down and crossed the room, pulling the door open a crack. A boy stood on the step, no more than 12, his face streaked with dirt, his shirt too big for his narrow shoulders. He held out a folded piece of paper. "For you," he said, "from the marshal." Ada took the paper, and the boy ran before she could ask anything. She unfolded it and read the words twice, her stomach tightening with each line. "Miss Wade, you are required to appear at the marshal's office this morning at 8 o'clock. Do not be late. Marshal Cord." She looked at the sky. The sun was just clearing the roofline across the street. She had 20 minutes. The marshal's office sat at the center of town, a squat building with bars on the windows and a hitching post out front. Ada pushed through the door and found Marshal Cord standing behind his desk, his arms crossed, his face set in the hard expression he wore when he wanted people to know he was serious. Deputy Lang stood beside him, and in the corner, wrists bound with rope, sat the man from the saloon. He looked up when she entered, and his eyes went flat, unreadable. She made herself look away. "Miss Wade," Marshal Cord said. "Thank you for coming. You did not give me a choice," Ada said. "Sit down." She sat in the wooden chair across from the desk and folded her hands in her lap. Her heart was pounding, but she kept her face calm, her voice steady. "What is this about?" "This man," Cord said, nodding toward the corner. "His name is Silas Pruitt. He rode into town last night with blood on his coat and a stolen horse tied outside the saloon. We have reason to believe he is connected to a stage robbery 3 days ago. 2 men dead, cash box missing. You spoke to him." "I told him where to find work," Ada said. "That is all. You sent him to Star Ranch." "I did." "Why?" "Because that is where people go when they need work. I have sent a dozen men there in the past year. It is not a crime." Cord leaned forward, his hands flat on the desk. "It is a crime if you are helping a fugitive." "I did not know he was a fugitive," Ada said. "I still do not know that." "You are telling me he is, but I see no proof. The proof is the blood on his coat and the horse that does not belong to him," Lang said. "And the fact that he ran straight to you for help." "He did not run to me," Ada said. "He walked into a saloon and asked a question. I answered it. If that makes me guilty, then you should arrest half the town." Silas Pruitt spoke for the first time, his voice low and steady. "She did not help me. She does not know me. Leave her out of this." Cord turned his attention to Silas. "Then, tell me where you got the horse. Tell me where you were 3 nights ago. Tell me why you have blood on your coat." Silas said nothing. Cord let the silence stretch, then nodded to Lang. Put them both in the holding cell. We will sort this out when the circuit judge arrives. Wait, Ada said, standing. You cannot arrest me. I have done nothing. You obstructed an investigation, Cord said. You sent a fugitive to a ranch where he could disappear. That makes you an accessory. I did not obstruct anything, Ada said, her voice rising. I answered a question. That is not a crime. Sit down, Miss Wade. No. Lang moved toward her, and Silas stood, the rope around his wrists pulling tight. Touch her, and you will regret it, he said. The room went still. Lang stopped, his hand halfway to Ada's arm. Cord stared at Silas, his jaw working. You threatening an officer? I am telling you to leave her alone, Silas said. She has nothing to do with this. Then you confess. Silas said nothing. Cord nodded to Lang. Both of them. Cell 2. Ada felt Lang's hand close around her arm. Firm, but not rough. And she let him guide her toward the back of the office. The holding cell was small, barely 8 feet square, with a single narrow window high on the wall, and a wooden bench along one side. Silas was shoved inside first, then Ada, and the door clanged shut behind them. The lock turned with a heavy click, and Lang walked away, his boots echoing on the floorboards. Ada turned and found herself alone with a man she did not know, in a cell she could not leave, accused of a crime she did not commit. She pressed her back against the wall and took a slow breath. This is your fault, she said. Silas sat down on the bench, his bound wrists resting on his knees. I know. You should have told them the truth. The truth will not help. Why not? Because the truth is worse than what they think. Ada stared at him. What does that mean? It means I did not rob that stage, Silas said. But I know who did. And if I tell them, they will hang me anyway. She crossed her arms, the brown wool of her dress rough under her fingers. Then why protect me? You do not know me. Silas looked up, his pale eyes meeting hers. Because you helped me when you did not have to. And because I am tired of watching innocent people pay for things they did not do. The words hung in the air between them, sharp and true. Ada felt something shift in her chest, a crack in the wall she had built 2 years ago, and she hated it. She hated that he could do that with a single sentence. She turned away and stared out the high window, watching the clouds move across the gray sky. They stayed in the cell for 3 hours. No one came. No one brought food or water. Ada sat on the floor in the corner farthest from Silas, her knees pulled up, her arms wrapped around them. She did not speak, and he did not push her. He sat on the bench, leaning back against the wall, his eyes half closed, his breathing slow and even. He looked like a man who had learned how to wait. The rain started just after noon, a light patter against the roof that turned into a steady drumming. Ada watched the water run down the outside of the window, tiny rivers carving paths through the dust on the glass. She thought about the saloon, the stage, the life she had built in Broken Bluff. It was not much, but it was hers. Now it felt like sand slipping through her fingers. Why did you come here? She said finally. Silas opened his eyes. To Broken Bluff. Yes, I heard there was work. Horses. I am good with horses. Where are you from? Silas was quiet for a long moment. East, he said. Far enough that it does not matter anymore. Ada nodded. She understood that. Far enough that it does not matter. That was the only geography that counted out here. What about you? Silas said. Where are you from? Nowhere, Ada said. Everyone is from somewhere. Not anymore. He studied her, his eyes steady and curious. You running from something. Ada met his gaze. Are you? Silas smiled, a small crooked thing that did not reach his eyes. Yes. Then we have that in common, Ada said. The door at the front of the office opened and Deputy Lang appeared, his coat wet with rain, his hat dripping. He unlocked the cell and swung the door open. You, he said, pointing at Silas. Come with me. Marshall wants to talk. Silas stood and walked out without looking back. Lang locked the door again and Ada was alone. She pulled her knees tighter and closed her eyes, listening to the rain, trying not to think about what they might be asking him, what he might be saying. He was gone for an hour. When he came back, his face was pale and his jaw was set in a hard line. Lang shoved him into the cell and locked the door without a word. Silas sat down on the bench and dropped his head into his hands. What did they ask you? Ada said. Everything, Silas said. Where I was, who I know, what I am hiding. What did you tell them? Nothing. Why? Because the truth will not save me. It will just give them someone else to hang. Ada stood and crossed the cell, stopping a few feet from the bench. Who are you protecting? Silas looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. My brother. The words landed like a stone in still water. Ada felt the ripples spread through her chest, cold and sharp. Your brother robbed the stage. No, Silas said. My brother was there. But he did not rob it. He was trying to stop it. He got shot for his trouble. I was tracking the men who did it when the marshal found me. The blood on my coat is his. The horse belonged to one of the men who shot him. I took it because mine went lame, and I needed to get him to a doctor. But I cannot prove any of that. All they see is blood, and a stolen horse, and a man with no alibi. Where is your brother now? Safe, Silas said. I got him to a ranch north of here. He will live. But if I tell the marshal where he is, they will arrest him. They will say he was part of it. And he will hang, because he cannot prove he was not. Ada sank down onto the bench beside him, leaving a foot of space between them. So you are willing to hang for him? If that is what it takes, Silas said. That is not noble, Ada said. That is stupid. Silas looked at her, his mouth twisting. Maybe. But he is my brother. And I already lost everyone else. Ada felt the words settle in her chest, heavy and familiar. She understood that too. Losing everyone else. Being the last one standing. Carrying the weight alone. She reached out and touched his bound wrists, her fingers light on the rough rope. If I help you, she said, will you trust me? Silas stared at her. Why would you help me? Because I know what it is like to be blamed for something you did not do, Ada said. And because you stood up for me when you did not have to. That counts for something. What can you do? Silas said. You are locked in here too. Not for long, Ada said. She stood and walked to the cell door, gripping the bars, and called out. Deputy Lang. I need to speak to the marshal. Lang appeared a moment later, his expression annoyed. What? I have information, Ada said, about the stage robbery. But I will only tell the marshal. Lang hesitated, then nodded. Stay there. Ada turned back to Silas. When I get out, she said, I will find your brother. I will get his testimony. And I will bring it to the judge when he arrives. You do not even know where he is, Silas said. Then you better tell me, Ada said. Silas studied her for a long moment, then gave a small nod. North Ranch. 10 miles past the edge of town. Ask for a man named Holt. Tell him I sent you. He will know. Ada memorized the directions, then turned as Marshal Cord appeared at the cell door. Lang unlocked it, and she stepped out, her shoulders straight, her face calm. Cord gestured toward his desk and she followed him, leaving Silas alone in the cell. You said you have information, Cord said, sitting down. I do, Ada said. But I need something in return. Cord leaned back, his eyes narrowing. You are in no position to bargain, Miss Wade. I am in the only position to bargain, Ada said. You have a man in that cell who you think is guilty. I know he is not, and I can prove it. But I need you to let me go. Now. Today. Why? Because the proof is 10 miles from here, and it will disappear if I do not get to it first. Cord was silent for a long moment. Then he shook his head. No. You stay here until the judge arrives. If you have proof, you can present it then. The judge will not arrive for 3 more days, Ada said. By then the man you want will be gone, and you will hang an innocent man. How do I know you will not run? Cord said. Ada met his eyes. You do not. But I give you my word. I will come back. Your word means nothing if you are a criminal. I am not a criminal, Ada said. And neither is Silas Pruitt. Let me prove it. Cord stared at her, his jaw working. Then he nodded slowly. You have until tomorrow night. If you are not back by then, I will send a posse after you. And when they find you, you will hang alongside him. Understood, Ada said. Cord gestured to Lang. Let her go. Lang opened the front door, and Ada walked out into the rain. The cold water hit her face and soaked through her dress in seconds, but she did not stop. She walked to the livery stable at the edge of town, paid the man there for a horse, and saddle with the last of her savings, and rode north. The ride took 4 hours. The rain never stopped. Ada's dress clung to her skin, heavy and cold, her shawl useless against the wind. Her hands ached from gripping the reins, and her legs burned from the saddle. But she kept the horse moving, following the landmarks Silas had described. A dead tree split by lightning. A creek with a stone crossing. A ridge with 3 tall rocks standing like sentries. The ranch appeared just before dark. A low wooden house and a barn set against the base of a hill. Smoke rose from the chimney, thin and gray, quickly torn apart by the wind. Ada dismounted and tied the horse to the porch rail, then knocked on the door. It opened a crack, and a man looked out, his face weathered and suspicious. What do you want? I am looking for Holt, Ada said. Silas Pruitt sent me. The man opened the door wider. Come in. The house was small and warm, a fire burning in the stone hearth, a single lantern hanging from a hook on the wall. A man lay on a narrow cot near the fire, his chest wrapped in bandages, his face pale and drawn. He looked up when Ada entered and his eyes went wide. "Who are you?" "Ada Wade," she said. "Silas sent me. He is in jail in Broken Bluff, accused of robbing a stage. I need you to tell me what happened." The man on the cot struggled to sit up, and Holt moved to help him, propping him against the wall. "This is Daniel Pruitt," Holt said. "Silas's brother." Daniel stared at her. "Silas is in jail." "Yes," Ada said. "And he will hang unless you tell the truth." Daniel closed his eyes and took a shaky breath. "I was riding with a crew. We were hired to guard a shipment. 3 men jumped us on the road. They shot the driver. They shot me. I tried to fight back, but I went down. Silas found me an hour later. He tracked the men who did it, took one of their horses, and got me here. That is the truth. Can you write it down?" Ada said. "Can you sign it?" Daniel nodded. Holt brought a piece of paper and a pencil, and Daniel wrote slowly, his hand shaking, his words barely legible. When he finished, he signed his name and handed the paper to Ada. "Take it," he said. "Save my brother." Ada folded the paper carefully and tucked it inside her dress, against her ribs. She thanked Holt, walked back out into the rain, and rode south. The return ride was worse. The rain turned to sleet, sharp and stinging, and the temperature dropped. Ada's hands went numb. Her teeth chattered so hard she bit her tongue and tasted blood. The horse stumbled twice, and she nearly fell, catching herself on the saddle horn, pulling herself upright by sheer will. She did not think about stopping. She did not think about warmth or safety or anything except the piece of paper pressed against her skin and the man waiting in the cell. She reached Broken Bluff just after midnight. The town was dark, the saloon closed, the streets empty. She rode straight to the marshal's office and dismounted, her legs nearly buckling when her feet hit the ground. She pushed through the door and found Cord asleep at his desk, his head on his arms. She dropped the reins and crossed the room, her boots squelching with water, and slammed her hand on the desk. Cord jerked awake, his hand going to the gun on his hip. "Miss Wade, I have your proof," Ada said. She pulled the paper from her dress and laid it on the desk. The ink smudged, but still readable. Daniel Pruitt's testimony. Signed and witnessed. Silas Pruitt did not rob that stage. He saved his brother's life. Now let him go. Cord picked up the paper and read it slowly, his eyes moving over each line. When he finished, he set it down and looked at her. "This does not prove Silas is innocent. It just proves his brother says he is. It is the truth," Ada said. "And it is more than you had before." Cord stood and walked to the cell door, unlocking it. Silas was awake, sitting on the bench, his eyes on Ada. Cord stepped aside. "You are free to go," he said. "But you stay in town until the judge confirms this. If you run, I will hunt you down." Silas stood and walked out, his wrists still bound. Ada reached for the rope and untied it, her fingers clumsy and cold. The rope fell away, and Silas rubbed his wrists, staring at her. "You did it," he said. "I did," Ada said. "Why?" Ada looked up at him, her face pale and exhausted, her hair plastered to her cheeks. "Because you told me the truth," she said. "And because I am tired of watching innocent people hang." Cord told them to go. Ada walked out into the sleet, and Silas followed her. They stood on the porch, the cold wind cutting through their wet clothes, and Ada realized she had nowhere to go. The saloon would be locked. She had no key. Her room was upstairs, and there was no way in except through the front door. Silas touched her arm. "Come with me," he said. "Where?" "Star Ranch. You told me to go there. Now, I am telling you. You need to get dry and warm, or you will not make it through the night." Ada wanted to argue, but her body would not let her. She nodded and followed him to the livery stable. The man there was asleep in the loft, but he woke when they entered, grumbling. Silas paid him for 2 horses, and they rode west, the sleet turning back to rain. The darkness so thick Ada could barely see the road. Star Ranch appeared like a ghost in the mist. Low buildings and a barn, a lantern burning in the window of the main house. Silas dismounted and helped Ada down, his hands steady on her waist. She leaned against him for a moment, too tired to be embarrassed, and he held her until she found her balance. Then he led her to the house and knocked. The door opened, and a woman stood there, gray-haired and sharp-eyed, wrapped in a wool robe. "Silas," she said, "you look half drowned." "I am," Silas said. "This is Ada Wade. She saved my life tonight. She needs a place to sleep." The woman looked Ada up and down, then stepped aside. "Come in, both of you." The house was warm and dry, a fire burning in the hearth, blankets piled on a long bench near the wall. The woman, who introduced herself as Mrs. Tanner, gave Ada a dry dress and a cup of hot tea, then showed her to a small room at the back of the house. Ada changed out of her wet clothes and lay down on the bed, pulling the blankets over her, and fell asleep before she could think about anything else. She woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of bacon frying. She dressed in the borrowed dress, a soft gray cotton that fit well enough, and walked out to the main room. Silas sat at the table, a plate of food in front of him, talking to Mrs. Tanner. He looked up when Ada entered and stood. "You slept 12 hours, he said. "I needed it," Ada said. Mrs. Tanner set a plate in front of her, and Ada ate without speaking, the food solid and warm and grounding. When she finished, Silas pushed his chair back. "We need to talk," he said. They walked outside, into the cold morning air, and stood near the barn. The sky was clear, pale blue and endless, the ground still muddy from the rain. Silas leaned against the barn wall, his arms crossed. "I owe you," he said. "You do not owe me anything," Ada said. "I do," Silas said. "You risked your life for me. You rode through a storm to save a man you do not know. That is not nothing." Ada shook her head. "I did it because it was right, not because I wanted something from you." "I know," Silas said, "but I still owe you, so I am going to tell you the truth. All of it." Ada waited. "My name is not Silas Pruitt," he said. "It is Silas Kern. I changed it 2 years ago after my father died. He was a cattle thief. He stole from every ranch within 100 miles. When he died, the ranchers came after me and my brother. They said we were part of it. We were not. But they did not care. So we ran. Daniel went north. I went west. I have been using a false name ever since. Ada felt the ground shift under her feet. She looked at him, at the hard line of his jaw, the exhaustion in his eyes, the way he held himself like a man waiting for a blow. "Why are you telling me this?" she said. "Because you deserve to know who you saved," Sheila said. "And because I am tired of lying." Ada took a slow breath. "My name is not Ada Waite," she said. "It is Ada Brennan. I took my mother's maiden name 2 years ago, after I ran from a man who said he owned me. I was a singer in a theater in St. Louis. He was a theater owner. He decided I belonged to him. When I refused, he tried to kill me. I ran. I have been running ever since." Silas stared at her. "You are running too?" "Yes," Ada said. "Then we are the same," Silas said. Ada nodded. "Yes." They stood in silence for a long moment, the truth settling between them like something fragile and precious. Then Silas reached out and took her hand, his fingers rough and warm. "What do we do now?" he said. "We go back to town," Ada said. "We face the judge. We tell the truth, and we see if it is enough. And if it is not," Silas said, "then we run together," Ada said. They returned to Broken Bluff that afternoon. The town was buzzing with news. The circuit judge had arrived early. The trial would begin the next morning. Ada went back to the saloon and found her room locked, her belongings piled in the hall. The owner, a sour-faced man named Garrett, stood at the top of the stairs with his arms crossed. "You brought shame to this place," he said. "You are not welcome here anymore." "I paid for the month," Ada said. "And I am giving you your money back," Garrett said. He dropped a handful of coins on the floor and walked away. Ada picked up the coins and carried her trunk downstairs. Silas met her at the door. "Where will you go?" he said. "I do not know," Ada said. "Stay at the ranch," Silas said. "Mrs. Tanner said you could." "I cannot keep taking charity," Ada said. "It is not charity," Silas said. "It is a job. She needs someone to cook and clean. She said she would pay you." Ada hesitated, then nodded. "All right." They loaded her trunk onto a wagon and drove back to Star Ranch. Mrs. Tanner met them at the door and showed Ada to the same small room she had slept in the night before. "This is yours," she said, "as long as you need it." Ada set her trunk down and turned to thank her, but Mrs. Tanner had already gone. She sat on the bed and stared at the wall, feeling the weight of the past 2 days settle on her shoulders. She had lost her job. She had lost her room. She had lost the fragile safety she had built in Broken Bluff. But she had gained something too. She had gained the truth. And she had gained Silas. The trial began the next morning in the town hall, a large wooden building with high windows and rows of benches. The room was packed, every seat taken, people standing along the walls. Ada sat in the front row, her hands folded in her lap, her heart pounding. Silas sat beside her, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the judge. Judge Mallory was a gray-haired man with a stern face and a voice like gravel. He called the court to order and read the charges. Silas Pruitt, also known as Silas Kern. You are accused of armed robbery, theft of property, and conspiracy to commit murder. How do you plead? Not guilty, Silas said. The prosecution called Marshal Cord first. He testified about the stolen horse, the blood on Silas's coat, the lack of an alibi. Then he called Deputy Lang, who repeated the same story. The room murmured, the crowd shifting, hostile eyes on Silas. The defense called Daniel Pruitt. He walked to the stand slowly, his chest still bandaged, his face pale. He told the story exactly as he had written it. The ambush, the shooting, Silas finding him, Silas saving him. When he finished, the prosecutor stood and asked one question. How do we know you are telling the truth? Daniel looked at him. Because I am under oath, and because my brother has never lied to me. The prosecutor sat down. The defense called Ada. She walked to the stand, her legs shaking, and swore to tell the truth. The defense attorney, a young man named Carter, asked her to describe what happened the night Silas arrived in town. She told the story clearly, calmly, leaving nothing out. When she finished, the prosecutor stood. Miss Wade, he said. Or should I say, Miss Brennan? You are running from the law yourself, are you not? Ada felt the room shift. She looked at Silas and saw his face go white. I am not running from the law, she said. I am running from a man who tried to kill me. That is not the same thing. But you are using a false name, the prosecutor said. Yes, Ada said. So you are a liar. I am a survivor, Ada said. And I am telling the truth about Silas Kern. He did not rob that stage. He saved his brother's life. That is the truth. And if you cannot see it, then you are blind. The room erupted. Judge Mallory slammed his gavel and called for order. The prosecutor sat down, his face red. The defense rested. The judge called a recess. Ada walked outside and leaned against the wall, her hands shaking. Silas followed her. You did not have to do that, he said. Yes, I did, Ada said. He took her hand and pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. Whatever happens, he said, I am glad I met you. I am glad I met you too, Ada said. The court reconvened an hour later. Judge Mallory read his verdict slowly, his eyes on the paper in front of him. After reviewing the testimony and the evidence, I find that the prosecution has failed to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Silas Kern committed the crimes of which he is accused. The charges are dismissed. Mr. Kern, you are free to go. The room exploded again, half the crowd cheering, half shouting in anger. Silas stood and turned to Ada, his face stunned. We won, he said. We won, Ada said. They walked out of the courthouse together, into the cold afternoon air, and the town watched them go. Some people nodded. Some turned away. Ida did not care. She held Silas's hand and walked toward the edge of town, where the wagon waited. They returned to Star Ranch, and Mrs. Tanner met them at the door with a smile. I heard the news, she said. Welcome home. Home, Ada thought. The word felt strange and right at the same time. That night, Ada and Silas sat on the porch, watching the stars come out, the sky clear and endless above them. I do not know what comes next, Ada said. Neither do I, Silas said. But I know I want to find out with you. Ada turned to look at him. You mean that? I do, Silas said. I have spent 2 years running. I am tired of it. I want to stay somewhere. I want to build something. And I want to do it with you. Ada felt the words settle in her chest, warm and solid. I want that too, she said. Then stay, Silas said. Stay here. Work with me. We can train horses together. We can make this place ours. Ada nodded. All right. Silas reached for her hand, and she let him take it. They sat in silence for a long time, watching the stars, feeling the cold wind on their faces, knowing that the future was uncertain, but no longer impossible. The next weeks passed in a rhythm that felt almost normal. Ada cooked for Mrs. Tanner and cleaned the house and helped with the chickens. Silas worked in the barn, training the horses, teaching them to trust, to respond, to move with grace instead of fear. Ada watched him work and saw the way the animals calmed under his hands, the way he spoke to them, low and steady, like he was telling them secrets. She started singing again, not on a stage, but in the evenings, after dinner, when the work was done. She sang old songs, ballads and hymns, her voice filling the warm room, and Silas listened, his eyes on her face, his expression soft. One night, Mrs. Tanner went to bed early and left them alone by the fire. Ada sat on the floor, her back against the stone hearth, and Silas sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. Tell me something true, he said. Ada thought for a moment. I am afraid, she said, that this will not last, that someone will find me, that I will have to run again. Silas nodded. I am afraid too, he said, that I will fail, that I will not be enough, that I will lose you. You will not lose me, Ada said. How do you know? Because I choose you, Ada said. Every day. I choose you. Silas turned to look at her, his eyes searching her face. I choose you too, he said. He leaned forward and kissed her, slow and careful, his hand on her cheek. Ada closed her eyes and let herself fall into it. The warmth and the certainty. The feeling of being known and chosen. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. This is real, she said. Yes, Silas said. This is real. Spring came, and the prairie turned green. Ada planted a garden behind the house, rows of beans and squash and tomatoes. Silas built a fence around it to keep the deer out. They worked side by side, their hands in the dirt, the sun warm on their backs. Mrs. Tanner watched them from the porch and smiled. One afternoon, a rider came to the ranch. He was young, dusty, his horse lathered with sweat. He asked for Silas, and Mrs. Tanner called him in from the barn. The rider handed him a letter and rode away without waiting for a reply. Silas opened the letter and read it slowly, his face going still. Ada walked over and touched his arm. What is it? It is from my brother, Silas said. He is coming here. He wants to start over. With us. Ada felt a surge of warmth in her chest. Then we will make room, she said. Silas looked at her, his eyes bright. You mean that? Yes, Ada said. He is family. Silas pulled her close and held her, his chin resting on the top of her head. Thank you, he said. Daniel arrived 2 weeks later, thin and pale, but healing. He moved into the bunkhouse and started working with the horses alongside Silas. Ada watched them together and saw the way they moved, the silent understanding between them, the trust that had been tested, and it held. The town slowly accepted them. Ada sang at the church social, and people clapped. Silas sold a string of horses to a rancher from the next county, and the man paid him well. Mrs. Tanner told everyone who would listen that she had found the best workers in the territory. Summer turned to fall, and the nights grew cold. Ada and Silas stood on the porch one evening, wrapped in a single blanket, watching the stars. "I want to marry you," Silas said. Ada turned to look at him. "What?" "I want to marry you," Silas said. "I want to stand up in front of everyone and say that you are mine and I am yours. I want to build a life with you. A real life. Not just surviving. Living." Ada felt tears sting her eyes. "Yes," she said. "Yes." They married in the spring, in the small church at the edge of Broken Bluff. Mrs. Tanner stood as Ada's witness. Daniel stood as Silas's. The preacher spoke about love and trust and second chances, and Ada held Silas's hand and felt the weight of the past lift, just a little. After the ceremony, they walked back to the ranch, the whole town following them, and Mrs. Tanner had laid out a feast. There was food and music and dancing, and Ada sang, her voice clear and strong, and Silas stood beside her, his hand on her back, his face full of pride. When the guests left and the sun set and the stars came out, Ada and Silas walked out to the barn. They stood in the doorway, looking at the horses, the soft sound of their breathing, the smell of hay and leather. "This is ours," Silas said. "All of it." "Yes," Ada said. "It is." He turned to her and took both her hands. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to run again," he said. "And I will spend the rest of mine making sure you never have to hide," Ada said. They kissed, long and slow, the barn warm around them, the horses quiet, the world outside peaceful and safe. And for the first time in 2 years, Ada felt like she was home. The years passed. Ada and Silas built a small house on the edge of Star Ranch, close enough to help Mrs. Tanner, but far enough to call it their own. Daniel married a woman from town and brought her to the ranch, and the family grew. Ada sang at weddings and church socials, her voice still strong, still clear. Silas trained horses and sold them to ranchers all over the territory, his reputation growing, his name respected. They had a daughter, and then a son, and the house filled with noise and laughter and the kind of chaos that comes with children. Ada taught them to sing. Silas taught them to ride. Mrs. Tanner taught them to cook. And Daniel taught them to mend fences and care for the land. One evening, when the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Ada and Silas sat on the porch, watching the stars. "Do you ever regret it?" Ada said. "Staying here, not running." "No," Silas said. "Never." "Me neither," Ada said. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. The night was cold and clear, the stars bright above them, the prairie stretching out in all directions, endless and free. "This is home," Ada said. "Yes," Silas said. "This is home." They stayed on Star Ranch for the rest of their lives. Ada sang until her voice grew thin, and Silas trained horses until his hands grew stiff. They watched their children grow and leave and come back with children of their own. They buried Mrs. Tanner on the hill behind the house, and they buried Daniel beside her years later. They grew old together, slowly, stubbornly, refusing to let go. And when the time came, when Ada closed her eyes for the last time, Silas was beside her, holding her hand, whispering the words he had said on their wedding day. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to run again." And Ada smiled, because she had not run. Not once. Not ever. She had stayed, and it had been enough.